actor, writer, director. How valuable was the space in giving actors and writers and directors an opportunity at the time that it started?
I think the first opportunity I had to direct was at the space. And not because I'm a director, but because I was the only one free to do it. That was the extraordinary thing. There was no such structure of you the actor, you're the director, you're the writer. We were all in a democratic ensemble. I think it's the first time and the last time that democracy worked in art, because that's where my first play I wrote and performed there. I did my first direction. I did my first stage management. I made my first dress. Everything that happened the first time was at the space.
And as far as giving people an opportunity to express their anger and frustration and so on.
Well, you know, I think we expressed our joy. There was an enormous amount to be angry about, and we were angry at the fact that we had to fight so hard to be heard, I think. Why weren't there more audiences, and why were the press sometimes not very forthcoming with support? But it was a joyous celebration. It wasn't based in anger. I think it was based in incredible chutzpah. And the fact that we were free. We were actually so out on a limb that we were literally free to do everything. Brian gave us total freedom. Brian never encased us with any don'ts. Brian only gave us the carpet of do. See how far we can go to push the edge of the envelope.
In a measure, that kind of created a therapy for some people. I mean, there were people who needed help who came to the space, who grew from that.
I think it's extraordinary, actually, yes. I think of three people who came to the space in desperation because there was nowhere for them to go as human beings. And through that need for a home, they found the encouragement to express themselves, and they did, in one as an actor, one as a writer, and one just as a general psychiatrist for everybody else. Yes, it was. It was a great therapy. It was a great school of healing. And I think that healing also helped heal an audience and give a country something to look back on. 25 years back, we can look now towards something that worked, which was good, in a period that everything was bad. And I think the goodness of the space is something very precious that we have today.
And look, looking back 25 years, what do you see as the major impact the space had?
Well, I think looking back from where we are today, we can see that in the worst of times, something that was the best could happen. I think the major impact of the space was that it gave so many of us in the theatre today the fertile ground in which we could root ourselves. I think if you look at the theatre here, the ones that are left in South Africa, we started acting there, directing there, but mainly we got the alphabet of communication, and we believed in the impossible, that one didn't need sets and costumes. And I think when you look at modern theatre today, we were already doing that 25 years ago. But to look back, it's also important to see something good that happened in the darkest times, where everything was bad. The space was positive and optimistic, and that inspires us today to maybe actually not be so frightened to try out things that might also be good in 1997.
And this sounds sinister when one uses the word tentacles, but the tentacles of the space has spread out quite a lot all over the world.
Well, the space had the energy that moved on. I believe energies don't stay forever. I don't think the space could have lasted for longer than it did. The energy moved to Johannesburg, to Manny's Market. That's moved as well, frankly. That has gone to other places. We had, in small areas, there's one, even the Barnyard in Plet, there was the over-the-top cafe restaurant in Cork Bay. It moves wherever the energy goes. It roots itself back to the space. Before the space, there was the little theatre, the drama department, but that was the university department. There was never a commercial entity. I must be careful here because I'm sure there was a commercial entity, but let's just say that the space in my life was very much the first beacon, and has netted itself all over the world. I mean, there are space creatures all over the world at the moment.
Did your plays have made it to all parts of the world? What plays of yours have in fact moved across?
I think the plays that moved the quickest were Paradise is Closing Down and Just Like Home, God's Forgotten. The interesting thing was my life started in 1994 when Nelson Mandela became president. He freed me from jail. I mean, I'd been in jail up to then because my alphabet was just the three middle letters of the alphabet, meaning all we did in the theatre was give the answers and not ask questions. The space gave questions, asked questions, but then came the protest period, which was very boring because we had a bigger battle to fight than fill the theatres. But since 1994, when I travel overseas, I don't have the moral high ground in front of me anymore with people sitting up there saying, yes, free Mandela, get rid of apartheid, now what are you going to say? So since 94, the plays have been much more acceptably recognized as stories as opposed to propaganda, which I hope they never were. This is the great thing also, the space. We were never propagandists. We were always entertainers.
The theatre was the major thing. And God's Forgotten. When you did God's Forgotten here, how did the audiences, did they perceive, I mean, did it put fear into them at all? Or?
When God's Forgotten was first done in 75, I remember the censor board came to see God's Forgotten, and we thought that's it, because it was blasphemous to say God is forgotten, God's forgotten. But she saw it differently. She said, yes, God or was it God has forgotten? She saw it completely differently, as if we had forgotten God and therefore we must find God. So it was actually nice to see that people stood from different sides. They were poop scared. We did it in Johannesburg during the 76 Soweto riots. And the gunshots on the soundtrack matched the gunshots in the street. Some nights the audience stayed there till the police came to escort them home.
Did the 76 riots have an effect on the theatre, on the space particularly?
I'd left by then. I'd left then. I think 76 had an enormous effect on everybody. I think suddenly we were in a state of war, which we'd never been before. Suddenly we had to find areas to defend. And I think, yeah, it took longer for, I think it took longer for the world to discover us, but we discovered South Africa in 1976.
You were manager of the space for a while. I mean, now filling enough, not actor, director, and writer, but also a manager for a while.
I don't know what, I was just there. Brian was my friend, and we used to go and sit at the Stutterford's Tea Lounge and have toasted cheese and tea and literally talk through planning. And I suppose that's why I started understanding how important it is to plan ahead in pencil, never in ink. You never ink anything until it's happened, then you can ink it. But the planning of it, because now, since 76, I've been self-employed. Unemployable, I mean, whatever you call it, I've been my own boss. So, I mean, that's been my job to run my own business, my own theatre company. But I learned it there, I learned it from Brian.
Those years of the space, I mean, the anxiety of it, there was no money. There were actors to pay, although they were not getting a hell of a lot, but there were responsibilities. How did you handle it?
I don't know, we didn't think about the negative. We just knew that there was the energy to put on the next show, and hopefully we would survive and not be banned. And we were just so excited. I think it was just walking around with a permanent hard-on for theatre. I mean, we were so excited by every day. It was so wonderful just to be. I was there all the time. I was in that coffee bar all the time, morning, noon and night. And when I wasn't working, I was there as well. I was always there. In fact, when I left, I went into an enormous withdrawal of months of enormous, I mean, I was lost. I didn't know where to go because I'd been there for 3 years, every single day.
What do you think were the most important plays in this space? I know they were all important, but...
Interestingly, from my point of view, for me, the most important plays were the comedies. I was so excited to see the Noel Cowards and the Feydeau farces. Because I have a great thing about comedy. I think comedy is harder and has more of an echo than many other plays. And people thought we wouldn't do comedy. We thought we were terribly serious and terribly pretentious. And the comedies gave a very important balance. So I think obviously the Sizwe Banzi, the island plays were extremely important when one looks back on the echo. But I also think we did Afrikaans plays and we did Xhosa plays and we did things that weren't very politically correct, but we did them, and there were no restrictions. You see, that's another thing that I loved about the spaces. If you had a good idea, let's go and do it.
And some of those important plays, which ones made it to Broadway?
I didn't really care about what went to Broadway. You know, again, that's something we've lived through. People used to go through the whole thing of what went to Broadway. Well, yes, some things went to Broadway, but some things also went to Stellenbosch, and some things went to Johannesburg, and some things are still in people's minds today, and that's actually what really matters. What the language became South African. It wasn't just a Eurocentric colonial kickback to what was happening in other countries. It was uniquely South African.
The Space Club was an invention to circumvent the law here, and I think American audiences probably won't understand that. Can you tell us a bit about that?
Well, it was illegal. Most of the things we did broke some law. The biggest law we broke was the Group Areas Act because of the mixed audiences, which was a law that was a delight to break, but a full-time job. Then the censor laws were so broad they could have just actually banned your passport or your bank book or the telephone directory. And the Space Club was formed to actually circumvent the need to submit things to a censor board. We found a loophole, which meant that if you were a closed organization, a club, you could see things that the public couldn't see. And that's basically the idea of the Space Club. And then in the hands of Mohr, who was such an extraordinary organizer, and the people who worked with her, they managed to make the Space Club into something terribly, like the Lincoln Center. Something that people wanted to be part of. And it helped us perform, and it also helped us raise money. It helped us keep a very high profile because many people who were part of the Space Club were the best lawyers, the doctors, the people who could heal us when we were sick. And it was a means to an end. It was very much a survival oxygen tank.
But even there, the plays were banned.
Even though the plays were banned, and yet again, when one looked at the bannings, they became so funny. They were so absurd, and that's what I learned. When I went through my bannings, all my things that happened there, the first reaction was horror, terror. People threw me out of their homes. It wasn't fashionable. There were no T-shirts at the time. And then I suddenly realized how stupid these people were. They banned one play that you could read but not see, and the other one that you could see but not read, and you thought, what? And then we knew who came, these galumphing Neanderthals who came and the absurdity helped us survive because you just had to. It was totally serious, but you still knew that they were not clever or diabolical. They were just thuggish and obeying stupid orders. So one found ways to beat them.
That's DK, and I'm just using her as an example of a young girl who came to the space with nothing. Did you see the Glass House when it was done? Were you there?
I didn't see the Glass House. No, I saw Crelly. I was amazing. I liked it very much. I liked Fats always, and I've known Fats since then. Extraordinary, mercurial person. One moment you want to actually lock her up for a long time, and the next moment you want to take her home for a short time. But she has kept that great sense of humor, an extraordinary sense of honesty. I once did a show last year. I did a show in London where I did question answer as Evita Besaidner, and vrachtig, there was Fats in the audience, and she leapt up and she said, "Madam, I have followed you all over the world because you still owe me money for 1 month. I want my money." Well, the English nearly died. The English nearly, oh my God, what's happening? We had this enormous improv between Evita, the great volksmoeder, and Fat screaming from the audience. Magical. It could have been a show. And that's what I love about her. She's still got that wild, she's a wild horse. She's a wild stallion. And she was always one. She was a hopeless stage manager until she realized that she had to do it sober, and then she was never drunk again as a stage manager. But yeah, she taught me a lot of tolerance.
And the space, what did it teach you?
Well, the space taught me that you could do anything. The space taught me that nothing was impossible. Nothing. If you want to play the greatest part in the world, you can play it. If you want to write a play, you can write a play. If you want to do the impossible, you can do it. Just believe, because the space was the impossible, and it became a reality.
Well, it certainly gave you some wonderful characters that you saw the other night. No Space in Long Street. Were those characters that you wrote about all genuine space people? Or just
They were people around. I lived around Long Street between all those years. I was in various rooms and even the brothel up in Carnival Court. I was involved there, and all the characters I do in the. Even the brothel up in Carnival Court. When I thought of doing something about the space, I didn't want to stand there and give a lecture. First of all, I wasn't that involved. I was only involved a short period of the time. And I thought only my vivid memories are the ones that I remember, because everybody has a huge story to tell. But I wanted to tell the story of the people who were not working at the space, but the people who lived in the space, who are all indirectly affected by the space. In other words, how the theatre all over the world affects everybody, even if you don't go to it. Gracie, of course, the little Becky, I mean, she's still there. Not the same Gracie, because they don't live for that long, but she was there, very real. The spider, the tramp, he's still around. I have some friends among the old tramps who have been around for 30 years. The shopkeeper wasn't actually Italian, he was German, Willie, and Willie still works in Long Street. And I just thought, use a little bit of theatricality here, and not just like do the person, because again, one person is not that interesting. So each character was about a composition of about 10 different people. The most sinister one, of course, is the last one, Dr. Laterhan, who was, all right, I've just said the censor, the police were thugs, but the politicians were not thugs. The politicians were typical, who enjoyed the forbidden and then wouldn't allow anybody to share it. And that made them dangerous. And so it was nice to do her as well.
And finally, I mean, wasn't it great to be part of that space age?
I cannot see where I would be today without the space. I would definitely not have done what I've been doing without the space, with no question of it. It set me on the road inexorably towards something. I knew it was going somewhere, I didn't know where. It certainly alienated me from many people in my family. My father was not happy. And yet eventually my father understood why. The government was not happy, and I've survived them, as we all have. I think the space gave me a life jacket before I had to go and find one. And that life jacket was finding the truth. And the truth is what the space was based on. And that's my square one. I keep it with me. I go back to it once a month. What was the first reason for me to do what I'm doing? And I think the first reason was walking up there and seeing Brian's face, and he's saying, "What are you doing?" And I said, "Well, nothing." I said, "Listen, just here's a script, see if we can open it in 3 days' time." That was the impossible. It happened.